All right, thank you, Wendy. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tony Bergantino. I'm the acting director of the Wyoming State Climate Office and the Water Resources Data System. And I'd also like to welcome you to our October Wyoming Conditions and Outlooks presentation. And that's put together by my office, the University of Wyoming Extension and USDA Northern Plains Climate Hub, the US Geological Survey, National Weather Service, State Engineer's Office, and the State Forestry Division. And this update will look at current conditions, followed by surface water status, brief update on water rights administration, weather forecasts and outlook, a look back at the 2021 wildfire season, and then we'll finish with how you can participate and help us in the drought monitoring process. So let's get started here with the current drought map. For those of you who are new, this is a weekly product that is updated each Tuesday and is released on Thursday morning. So this just came out this morning. Areas circled here in the two different colors are ones that have changed their status since the last webinar, and you can see these green areas down here in the southwest represent some areas that we've had improvement. Also up here in the northeast, and we've also had some areas such as down here in the southeast and up here in the north central and northwest part of the state where we've gone down at least one category in the drought conditions. The improvements here are fairly recent, owing to some of the storms that have come through and dropped some good precipitation and upped our soil moisture. So at least we have had some improvements in the last little bit. Looking at the 14-day precipitation in terms of a percentile, you can see most of the state looks pretty purple there, which is a good wet sign. So when you look at what's above the median, it's most of the state, and the little gray areas where in the last 2 weeks or so that we've had median precipitation, about what you would expect. And then a little bit of area up here in Central Park County where we're a little bit below the median, but the influence of those last couple storms that have come through have really changed the map a bit here. And you can see that also when you look at this 90-day, which is the same thing, but you're looking at a 90-day time period. Central part of the state, off here into the east, southwest, Lincoln, Teton County, well above the median in terms of precipitation over the last roughly 3 months. Laramie County still down here in the well below the median area, the dry area, and then some areas up here in Park and on the Bighorns where we're seeing a little bit less than the median. But the main area of concern right now, as far as precipitation received, is this area down here in Laramie County, extending a little bit up into Goshen County there. This is the standardized precipitation index. Again, for those of you who might be new, the standardized precipitation index, or the SPI as it's usually called, takes precipitation totals over various time intervals, and we fit those to a normal distribution. And from that, we can figure out how far a given value is from the median or the middle value. And from that, we can calculate the probability that that total should occur. And this makes it really useful metric for looking at drought categories, since the drought categories are based on how often a particular condition occurs. For example, we would expect conditions corresponding to D2 or severe drought to occur about once every 10 to 20 years or so. So that probability of occurrence is really helpful for coming up with these categories. And as you can see here, looking at the 30, 60, and 90 day indices, areas of concerns standing out. The Cheyenne area here down in Laramie County is showing up at all time intervals as being on the dry side. And then you've got this area up here and mostly in Park County right now that's improving a little bit when you look at the 30-day versus the 60-day, but it's still an area of concern. And as you saw on that map when we first started, that area is still in D3 or the extreme drought. And this is the standardized precipitation evapotranspiration index, or the SPEI. And this goes one step further from the SPI that was on the previous slide. It's derived in a similar process, but it also includes evapotranspiration to add a measure of what the water demand might be. So you get not only the water coming into the system via precipitation, whether it's rain or snow, but also the potential loss of water to the atmosphere. And again, these are the 30, 60, 90-day time periods. And you can see some of the same areas again, the Laramie County area standing out, Park County up here. And we're starting to get some improvement up here in the northeast, north central part of the state, where we've gone from fairly on the dry side, evening out a little bit, mostly here in Johnson and southern Sheridan County. And then here, when you look at it in the 30-day, we're actually on the wet side, thanks to these storms that have come through here in the last little bit. Switching over to temperature, this is the average minimum temperature up here on the upper right. This is in actual degrees. We're seeing a little bit cooler temperatures in the high plains up in the higher elevation, but warmer temperatures out here in the plains. We're still getting into the 30s for a minimum temperature, that'd be your nighttime temperature, still into the 30s out in the plains, but low to mid 20s up here in the higher elevations, especially up when you get into the winds and the Bighorn area. Looking down here, this is also 14-day, but this is the departure from the average. This is how much above or below the average the temperature's been, and these green colors here up in the Laramie Valley, the Bighorns, the winds are all about upwards of 3 degrees below the average. These yellow colors that you're seeing scattered all throughout are up about 3 degrees above the average. And then as you get up into these oranger areas, these are 6 to, in a few areas up here, like in the high part of the upper green, are up to 9 degrees above average. But by and large, these oranger areas are up to 6 degrees above average for your minimum temperatures. And going over to the maximum, you're seeing over here in the far eastern plains, 60 degrees as an average over the last 2 weeks for your daytime highs. And moving over here into the east or into the west, we're getting highs up in the 30s, basically up in the higher elevation, into the 40s here once you get into the upper green and some of the higher elevations of the southwest there. And then by and large, mid low 50s for the remainder of the state down here in the south, and upper 50s up here in the north central and northwestern part of the state. But looking at in terms of a departure from the normal or the average, well below average for the maximum temperatures over the last 2 weeks. Down here in the southwest corner of the state, we're looking at temperatures that were up to 12 degrees below average, coming up to 6 to 9 degrees for most of the west of the divide. And then as you come into the Bighorn Basin and east of the Bighorns, Laramie Valley, we're looking about 3 to 6 degrees below average, and up to 3 degrees on the far eastern part here, except for this little sliver down here in Laramie and Goshen County, where we're up to 3 degrees above the average. Not a whole lot, but above the average, but still on the warm side compared, especially to the southwest over here. Snow? Well, it's a little bit earlier in the season than we normally look at the snow, but since we're starting to see some values showing up on the maps, I thought I'd throw them in here. This is just comparing the Basin snowpack percentages of median compared to last week. And as you can see, all the values are still asterisks. That means that they are not necessarily representative of the conditions. I mean, they are getting numbers coming in, but it takes a little bit going into the season for these things to settle out. And also you're seeing a lot of this area up here where you'd expect to see some percentages. The NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service, is still computing the normals to compare these two. So these will not get percentages until those are done here in the next month or so. But as you can see, we're as much as the numbers mean, we're well above the average down here in the south and coming up into the west and northwest. This is a little bit more, I don't want to say accurate, but more representative. This is modeled snow water equivalent, compared again to 2 weeks ago, where we were having just a little bit of snow up here in the winds and over in Lincoln County. We're getting a little bit more showing up here. We're getting some accumulation starting at the high elevation here in the bigs, the winds, Snowies, Laramie Range, and some sporadic transient snowpack showing up here in some of the plains area. I expect some of this to disappear fairly quickly in the next couple days. And this is showing the snow water equivalent. This is the actual moisture content of the snow that is on the ground. And you're seeing these areas over here, barely a trace is all we're really seeing down here in the plains, where there's actually some snow cover. up to 2 to 4 inches of water equivalent in some of the higher elevations, the bighorns, winds, some parts of the snowy range. But as I say, it's a little early in the year to be looking at what snowpack's doing, but it's good to see some accumulation starting up there. Soil moisture in terms of a percentile, again, comparing this morning to 2 weeks ago, some real improvements taking place in soil moisture thanks to these systems that have come through. Good chunk of Fremont County, a lot of Lincoln, half of Uinta County, where we're at the median for soil moisture percentiles. And you remember what those were looking like earlier in the year, where you were down in some of the lower categories that we have. And even, the whole area up in here that was in the lowest category, some of it's moved up quite a bit. We still do have a pocket of this 0 to 2 percentile here in Campbell, extending into Johnson County, and then the 2 to 5 coming down into here into Laramie County, Platte, Goshen, Albany, which you'd kind of expect considering we are still having the drought conditions down there, and then missed out on some of this recent precipitation. But this improvement has led to, in the soil moisture, has led to some improvements in the drought categories on the map that you were seeing. This just shows a few of the blends that go into coming up with the drought monitor map. I won't spend too much time on this. We're looking at precipitation over 60 and 90 days as a percentile, and then the standardized precipitation evapotranspiration index that we talked about over that same period, the 60-day and 90-day, along with the soil moisture percentile that we just looked at. And this plus several other parameters that we look at go into creating this map. And as you look at these, you can kind of see some areas that are standing out. You can see this swoop up here where we're still in D2 is corresponding to an area where we're still a bridge area where we're still not seeing the soil moisture as high as we'd like to, but it has been improving. The whole here in Fremont County, we're in D1, and some of this area up here where we're still in the lowest percentile on soil moisture is still showing up as D3. And you can see that in the indexes over here where the category is either D2 or D1, but since we've been in here kind of long term, we're still seeing D3 category up here in Park County. I'll take a little look at one of our mesonet stations. This is the one in Sheridan County on the 10th of October. We're looking at some bare ground. You can see where this one is if for anyone who's unfamiliar with where Sheridan is, but we're seeing bare ground. Move forward one day, we had some precipitation. You can see the little drops of rain showing up here. And then on the 12th, we got our big snowfall up in Sheridan. And then it's interesting to watch these photos as we go through. The next day, lost about 3 inches. The day after that, about another 3. And here we're starting to see some bare ground in the plot. And then by the 16th, all the snow's gone. But here's what the snow did. It kind of put a blanket of insulation on there, so we didn't see this is soil temperature there at our 5 depths. You can see the daily fluctuation with the sun heating the soil as you go on, but then once we got that covering the snow, you lose that heating of the soil, and with the snow on top of it, you're starting to see that soil temperature go down. However, since we barely only got down below 40 degrees at the top, at the 5 centimeter or 2 inch depth, and it's warmer as you go down, the soil's still open for taking in the moisture. So when that snow did melt over that course of days, we got a nice influx of moisture going into at least the 2 top sensors of the snow of the soil down to the 4 inches. And another way of looking at this is with the snow depth here as a plot, and then the soil moisture going up as this snow starts to melt off. You can see it going directly into the soil, which is really, really nice to see. This is something we didn't see when we were looking at the snow on top of that during those like the February and the March webinars where the ground was frozen, all that snow came. It wasn't really effective precipitation since it didn't really have any benefit to the ground, but at least we're starting to see some of this snow that we've been getting actually go into the ground. And then these next ones are just showing a couple other stations around. This is the Thunder Basin one showing the increase from the melt. This is the same storm you're seeing at 10 centimeter and 20 centimeters. And it kind of levels off at the lower depths, this decline that we were having. This is Devil's Gate. It's a state engineer's office station. It was another system that came through a little bit earlier for this station. You see the bump up. And then the one that impacted Sheridan also came up. And then we got one a little bit after before the soil moisture dropped too far. So we got a jump up on top of that. And one last one is a new one that they put in here at Elk Mountain. This one isn't showing as much. We're seeing a few bump ups, but they come off pretty quick and the soil goes right back to the conditions they were in prior to the snow. But at least we did get a little bit of a bump up and no real effect at the deeper depths. And we'll finish up here with the drought timeline. This is just an updated map showing the percentage of Wyoming that's in each of the categories. And as you can see, we're still up above what we were in 2020 here. It's a little hard to see at this scale. So let's come to this one, which just shows since the beginning of 2020. You can see the bump up during the year there, a little bit of a relief coming up here. And then as we got back into the summer and in July of this year, we started going back up. The nice thing to see is that we did, thanks to these last few storms, we did drop a little bit in terms of both the severe and the extreme drought. So I'm not saying we're out of it yet, but at least we are going down a little bit from where we were in previous weeks. And with that, I will turn it over to Aaron Fiaschetti with the USGS, who will talk to us about surface water.
Thank you, Tony. Yeah, glad to present this month and glad to have a little bit something better to talk about. My presentations have been pretty dry this summer. So, but anyways, so this is what it looks like right now from our national water dashboard in the state. We're starting to see much more green and blue and dark blue from the recent moisture. And just to kind of qualify that, green is normal. That's from the 25th to the 75th percentile, pretty wide range. The darker or the light blue is above the 75th. And then those on the lower end, the orange and red are below the 25th. And that very bright red is an all-time low. So we're seeing some improvements, but still in general, when you're seeing a gauge that shows up as green, chances are that's probably below the average, below the median, and somewhere between that 25th and 50th percentile. Next slide, please. So just to show what trends have been, this graph shows 51 sites. We have 130 sites in Wyoming. So you have to appear on this graph, it has to have at least 30 years of record and no missing values. So, but what you see here is those same categories where the green is that normal flow. We're seeing an improvement in flow. We're starting to see more conditions that are above normal or high recently with the moisture coming through here in mid-October. And we're starting to see less orange, less red, and less bright red. We still are setting a couple lows for the day, and that's the Gibbon River up in the park. And then the Snake River at Moose, Wyoming also set a record low for the day recently. So in general, things are trending towards better conditions. Right now, we're kind of stepping into the winter base flows. So generally there's not a lot of water in the system, not a ton of variability in flows, but things are looking better. So that is helpful. Next slide, please. So just kind of a comparison from what Brian had presented last month. These blue squares are just kind of showing some areas of improvement. So kind of up in the Bighorn Tongue area, flows are looking better this month as compared to last month. And then kind of down in the southeast, in the Platte area flows are starting to look a lot better than they were last month, where we had some really low flows in the area. Now things look quite a bit better. And I was just looking on the map, it looked like the Wind River did shed a fair amount of water through it. So it had a pretty big bump in flow recently. So in the central part of the state, assuming that's kind of melting snow coming off and flushing some flow down through the river that could be captured. So just in general, more sites trending towards normal, but the Northwest and West Central are still pretty dry. So just to kind of take a snapshot of some select gauges around the state, the North Fork of the Shoshone, it's been kind of hanging in near normal conditions for the last couple months, but it tends to be towards that lower end, pretty close to that 25 to 30th percentile. So not a lot of fall rain or melting snow kind of moving through that system as of yet, as we recede into winter base flows up there. Next, please. Looking over at the Bighorn, a much more managed, regulated system. Flows lately have increased some, kind of hanging out in that normal area. I'm sure some of that has to do with management and movement with water, but we do see a recent bump in flows. And I'm not quite sure if that's related to precipitation or movement of water downstream for storage. So, but trending to looking towards better in that area right now. The next one, please. Looking over at the North Platte at the state line, things have been looking pretty low over there. Had a pretty significant dip in flows in September, and then just they're brought up to just around that 5th percentile to 5th to 10th percentile. So flow making it across the state line at this time appears to be very low. But as you look farther up the Platte, it seems like flows look quite a bit better as you go upstream. So I'm not quite sure why the state line is showing quite a bit difference in the flow conditions. Moving on, the Encampment River is looking pretty good. As you see into September, coming into October, must be precipitation boosting flows quite a bit, getting near the upper end of that normal range. So things look pretty good as the encampment kind of comes into the winter conditions. Hopefully that continues on in that location, but in general, things look pretty good as of recent. You can see in June, July, and August, things were quite low in that area. Moving on to the green near LaBarge, same thing, August, September, looking really low. Coming into October, we see an increase in flows, hanging to near that bottom of the normal range, somewhere in the 25th percentile. Still pretty low. Can't quite attribute that to being precipitation or movement of stored water downstream, but hopefully those flows continue to improve. And then the last one, Tony. Over at the Snake, we did see a really low flow at the Snake at near Moose, Wyoming, but here's Snake River above the reservoir, above the Palisades near Alpine, and see in September, there's a pretty drastic drop in flow. I'm assuming that's due to reservoir management, bringing it down from pretty high to near that 25th percentile or lower. when we go to the next slide, you'll see that percent of storage in the Jackson Lake and Palisades River is quite low, but that was a pretty significant drop in river conditions there on the Snake River, and we're seeing some pretty low flows. So just a snapshot at the reservoirs in the state. There hasn't been a lot of change in storage as compared to last month. A few have increased, like we saw a small increase in Basin, and some have decreased. But one that does jump out is the Jackson and Palisades being very low, is that percent of storage. So I don't think we have anyone from the Bureau of Recon, but those reservoirs seem to be quite low. But in general, it seems like most reservoirs kind of maintain their storage. They might have picked up a little bit or let a little bit out, but I'm assuming most folks are just kind of just carrying forward what they can into winter, into next spring, in hopes that they'll hopefully fill up. That's all I have, Tony. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Next up is Jeff Cowley from the State Engineer's Office, and he'll be here to give us an update on water rights administration.
Hello, folks. Glad to see everybody here, and good to be talking about a little bit of water on the ground. I apologize, this map is not updated like it has been in the past, but there are very few calls on right now. I have some updates here I can give you from division by division. In Division 1, the only two streams on call right now are the Laramie and the Little Laramie. You can, Tony, if you want to try and hover over them, you can, but some of these, I don't know exactly where they are. So Division 2, there are no calls due to that heavy wet snow last week. There are no calls in Division 2. In Division 3, there is calls on Medicine Lodge, Paint Rock, Shell Creek, and then Little Rocky / Bennett Creeks. So that is very, net part of it is it's October and people should be irrigating less. It's getting pretty cold out there, and I don't know what kind of regrowth they would get, but that's quite a bit less than earlier this year. Then in Division 4, we have South Piney and Fish Creek. There is still a call on there. Most folks should be done irrigating, if not last week, here in the next couple of weeks, because as Tony showed, it's starting to get cold in the mountains and valleys in western Wyoming. Next slide, Tony. There we go. That we talked about this last month. It's DROA, which is Drought Response Operation Agreement. In the Colorado River, this is an emergency DROA release that the Bureau of Reclamation brought on to try and prop up elevations in Lake Powell. You'll see here in Wyoming and Flaming Gorge, their releases will finalize this month. And if you've been at Flaming Gorge, you may see that they mentioned that it would drop the water elevation by 3 to 4 feet in Flaming Gorge. These releases are on top of releases that are already required for endangered fish. So the elevation of Flaming Gorge probably changed more than 3.5 feet since these releases started, but the drop in regards to this exact 125,000 acre feet release should only be a piece of that, because there are still releases that have to take place otherwise. There was one thing I could update from the previous presenter. Those flows at the state line on the North Platte are very, very low right now because they are working on the outlet gates at Guernsey Reservoir. So the gates at Glendo are completely shut right now. They're holding all water back. There is a little bit of flow from natural creeks or other tributaries between Glendo Reservoir and the state line, and then return flows from irrigation that happened all summer. So that's probably why those flows are so much lower than normal. And as you may have noticed on the one teacup diagram, Guernsey Reservoir is 0% full because they have to keep that water as low as they possibly can to do that work. They should be done. I don't know when they should be done, but they should be done here shortly so that they can start filling, because that's when Guernsey Reservoir has the ability to fill, is in the winter time. So hopefully they're done with that quickly and can start filling, and then they can open Glendale back up and get Guernsey Reservoir full. One more comment I did have, that's beautiful data there, Tony, on the Elk Mountain Soil Moisture Probe that was recently installed by me and my staff here. And next month, we're going to install another one at Douglas and keep moving on from there. We have 14 more that Tony and his division or agency was able to buy for us. So we're going to start installing those 1 meter soil moisture probes at all of our weather stations. So thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. And next up, we have a new speaker who will be Melissa Smith from the Rapid City National Weather Service to talk to us about the weather forecasts and the outlooks.
All right, thanks, Tony. Let's go to the next slide here, and we'll start off with our 7-day liquid precipitation forecast. This is what we're looking at from today through next week around the Thursday timeframe. Pretty much east of the divide, we're looking for minimal precipitation, maybe a 1/4 inch or less over the Bighorns, you know, with just a little bit of moisture there in the Laramie range. And as you get down to Medicine Bow area, we're looking for about a 1/4 inch to 1 inch. Most of the precipitation is going to be in the western part of the state. We're looking for some showers in the Saturday through Monday timeframe. But the heaviest precipitation is going to come on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of next week. And that's when we're looking at some really good mountain snows over there in the Tetons and down through Star Valley and into the Wind River Range there. For temperatures, we're going to start out pretty warm this weekend with a little bit of a warming trend, and then we're going to trend down to when we're going to see that precipitation in that Tuesday, Wednesday timeframe. But then we're looking at another warm up after that. Let's go to the next slide, Tony. So I'm going to start here with the image on the right. That is our 6 to 10 day precipitation outlook. You can kind of see the same trend is that we showed in that liquid precipitation forecast on the previous slide. So we're looking at a greater chance of above average precipitation for the western half of the state, with really near average conditions for areas on the eastern half. As far as the temperatures go, the image on the bottom left there, where we're not going to see the precipitation, we're going to be in those drier in those drier conditions. We're going to end up with warmer temperatures in the next 6 to 10 days. And in the western half of the state, as that moisture comes in, we're going to be seeing below average temperatures that's going to correspond with the snow. And then in between, they're going to be near normal as we divide those two air masses across the state. So now we'll go to the next slide. This is our 8 to 14 day precipitation. It finishes up October. We get into early November. Again, we'll start on the top right with our precipitation outlook. You can really see that as we get into November, the trend for precipitation starts to dry out. Most of southeastern Wyoming is going to be in that below average precipitation, kind of that trend of what we had been seeing over the last several weeks. If we look at the temperature outlook there on the left, kind of where those drier conditions are, we're again going to see those above average temperatures, with the rest of the state only in the near normal type temperatures, especially where we get the snowpack towards the end of this month. It's going to really keep those temperatures closer to average. So go to the next slide. So one thing to point out during that 8 to 14 day time period is, even though that we're looking for that below average precipitation, those drier conditions, and even the above average temperatures, we do have a slight outlook for the 28th, next Thursday, on some windy conditions. The risk of high winds, it's typically winds sustained at 40 miles an hour or greater and gusts over 60 miles an hour. We are looking at that for portions of the I-25 and I-90 corridor there in the eastern portion of the state. So go to the next slide. So our winter outlook was released today, and this is what we're showing for the winter. We will start out again with precipitation like we have been. One thing to note that a lot of northwestern portions and the western part of the state there does have a greater chance for above average precipitation. Typically what we see in a winter, we're coming into our second year in a row of a La Nina. And what we'll usually see is during, especially the early winter, this only goes through February, is that we'll see what we call a northwest to a westerly flow pattern, where we get a lot of moisture that comes into the Pacific Northwest. And that moisture will make its way into the western portions of Wyoming, mainly west of the divide. As that moisture tries to spill over the mountains, then we sometimes it's able to get over the mountains and we see some above average precipitation. Other times the moisture doesn't make it over the mountains, and then we end up with more of those windy type conditions. So therefore, the eastern half of the state, we have these equal chances for above and below average, because there's really no signal either way on if we're going to get that moisture that's going to be able to make its way over the mountains this winter, at least through the December through February time period. As we look at temperatures that coincide with this, we see most of the state is in this equal chances type of regime. What we usually get is, with that moisture, some of those systems bring colder air down from Canada. And that's why you see those below average temperatures in the northeastern portion of the state. As that cold air comes down from Canada, a lot of times it will bank up against the divide. And so therefore, there's a greater chance of those colder temperatures to make its way into the northeastern portion of the state. And kind of the same way is the precipitation in between. You know, there's really no signal one way or another. Sometimes the cold air gets into the area and sometimes it stays rather warm. The one exception would be down in Uinta County, where we could see a greater chance for above average temperatures this winter, as that warmer air is going to be able to get up from the desert southwest and bring with it that warm and dry conditions will probably bring with it a greater chance of warmer temperatures this winter. So that's our winter outlook. All right,
Thanks,
Tony.
Melissa.
Thank you.
And next we have Anthony Schultz with the Wyoming State Forestry Division to give us an update and a look back on the 2021 wildfire season.
Yeah, thank you. So what you're seeing here on the screen is going to be our current fields condition. I won't beat this too hard. Everyone's kind of noted the lack of moisture in the northwestern portion of the state and around the Cheyenne area. You can see that reflected by the yellow dot northwest of Cody, as well as west of Cheyenne on Medbo. Essentially showing that our energy release component is going to be a little bit higher, meaning fuels are going to be a little bit drier in those portions of the state due to the lack of moisture. Everywhere else is looking really good. We're below the 50 percentile. So that brings me to the next slide, if you would. Next, yay, there we go. So this is also reflected in our fire occurrence. You can see, if you think back to September, August, there were a whole bunch of dots over the map to the left here. And right now you're not seeing many of those dots, which is a good thing from a fire point of view. It means we're not getting a whole lot of starts. Fire occurrence in Wyoming has been really limited. Really, the only fires we're seeing is a small one on the Wind River Reservation. And then off to the right, just on the border there with Wyoming and South Dakota northeast portion, you'll see a pink dot. That's just a prescribed fire. With the fields conditions being the way they are, it's a really good time for those land management agencies to go ahead and get a lot of burning done, right? And whether that's piles or that's broadcast burning, conditions are lending themselves for agencies to be able to do that. So that's most of the activity we're seeing in Wyoming. Nationally, You'll see the numbers to the right. This comes from our national SIT report from 209 fires, basically fires that were required to report on that meet size complexity requirements. Even nationally, we only had 59 of those fires. Most of the uncontained fires that are still going that have the type 1, type 2 IMTs committed are going to be located in California, Oregon, and Washington. And a lot of those are cleanup, right? So we've got a pull hose, we've got a rehabilitate, dozer line, those kind of activities. And so that's a lot of what's on, although there is the odd fire causing evacuations in California. So that's where we're at nationally and in Wyoming. Pretty quiet. It's a good thing. Next slide. Looking out for as far as fire danger goes, the northwest portion of Wyoming, you'll see in that October 2021 outlook is going to be above normal for fire danger. Again, reflective of a lot of the information that you guys have heard here today about the drier conditions in that portion of the state. Moving into December, most of the west, well, all of the west rather, is going to be dropping to more seasonally normal fire danger. And where you're seeing the elevated danger in Texas, Oklahoma, the eastern seaboard, that's relatively normal for this time of year for those folks. Next slide. So this is a little difficult to see. I didn't want to make it too blurry by blowing up. These are numbers now for a 2021 wildfire summary. How many fires did we have? What were those acreage causes and size classes? So for a total, in 2021, we had a total of 781 fires for roughly 27,278 acres is kind of where we're rocking. Most of those fires are classified as miscellaneous, but it's just a fire department's way of saying we don't know what caused this. And because we're not mandated to investigate every fire start on state and private land, that doesn't happen unless that fire caused issue, right? And so most of our fires here in Wyoming were going to be human caused, either from debris burning, equipment use, railroad starts, we had a couple of those, and then smoking. Interestingly enough, smoking causes far fewer fires than one might think. It's more carbon black or chains dragging on the highway rather than someone kind of flicking a cigarette out the window. So that's our cause category for all fires in Wyoming and the acres attributed to them, with lightning causing 174 fires, going for 99,045 acres. As far as fire class, we classify fires by class A through G, and that is dependent on their size. Operationally, we don't really talk this way. This is just a way for us to aggregate data and trends among what cause is potentially either larger fires or how many larger fires we did experience. So it was class F, class G fires. So as one would expect, most of the fires were roughly a quarter acre to 10 acres. That's holds true across really any kind of data time you'd be looking at temporally. Most of your fires are under 10 acres, between a quarter and 10 acres, with far fewer fires being those 1,000 to 5,000. I would expect to see that this year we were probably in that 90th percentile of success with our initial attack. We're typically very successful. That's from our helicopter to any kind of really suppression efforts that we engage in. Roughly 95 to 98% of the time we catch those, and they don't become those class F, class G fires. So that's the 2021 wildfire summary. The caveat to these data, to this data, is that these numbers are reported by all paid, unpaid, volunteer classes of firemen, right? Fire departments. And the problem with this is that they typically don't report a actual year-end summary we groom data from until roughly January. So keep in mind that this is a snapshot of a 2021 wildfire summary as fires keep getting reported. They've got a deadline here coming up for that reporting here in January. We get grant funding. And so once that hits, I would expect these numbers to probably outlet by at least 300. So roughly 900 to 1,000 fires probably for the 2021 season. But we'll see where those numbers land. So that's current fuels conditions outlook and then a 2021 wildfire summary.
Thanks for that update, Anthony.
Yep.
And now we'll have Wendy Kelly with UW Extension and also the USDA Northern Plains Climate Hub to take us to the end. Wendy.
Great, thank you, Tony. So go ahead and advance to the next slide. I always like to start this section with reflecting on how we started the webinar and looking at the current US Drought Monitor map, which was released earlier today. So this map again is released on Thursday of each week. And as Tony explained at the beginning of the webinar, we've seen a number of improvements in Western Wyoming, Southwestern Wyoming, as well as along the Northeast portion of the state since September 16th when we had our last webinar. And then we've also seen some degradations as well, sort of in that north central part of the state and in the southeastern portion of the state. And Tony did a great job of explaining and giving us some of the conditions information to help explain how we come to get this US Drought Monitor map, why it looks the way it does. But there's also a role for each of you, as well as different interested groups that you may work with, that I always like to remind everybody of because it's easy to forget in our busy lives. One is the CoCoRaHS volunteer program, which is a citizen science program. And you can see on the left-hand side of the map, the screen, the map showing what precipitation was reported or lack of precipitation since about 7 o'clock this morning here in Wyoming, and very little precipitation fell in the last 24 hours. This is a nice way to help fill in areas throughout the state where we know how variable precipitation can be and where it falls. And to the right, you can see a map of active station locations throughout Wyoming. So these are locations that have registered with the CoCoRaHS system or the program compared to those who actually reported today. And I'll just spend another minute on this because I haven't done it in a while, just to reiterate that you can sign up to be a CoCoRaHS volunteer. Tony administers the program for Wyoming. And between he and I, sometimes we are able to provide a standardized CoCoRaHS rain gauge for you if we have the funding. And so feel free to reach out to us on how to sign up and to see if there are any gauges available. If not, we can also provide the information on where you can buy these standardized rain gauges. Ideally, you report your data every day. I know sometimes I miss it just because I'm out of town or whatever it might be. But ideally, you do it every day by around 7 o'clock in the morning for how much precipitation. And the zero precipitation, reporting that is just as important, if not more important, than reporting when we do get precipitation to help us understand where it's dry out in the state. If you don't report a 0, it shows up as no data. Next slide, please. The other program I'll mention here is the Condition Monitoring Observer Report System, which is hosted at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. And this is an opportunity for you to submit a report, whether if it's related to livestock, wildlife, it could be fish, household, among others, and to let us know what the conditions are and the impacts, everything from severely dry to severely wet and everything in between throughout the state. And this program, it's kind of our national program for documenting impacts. And go ahead and go to the next slide, please. There are a couple of things that I do like to note related to the Seymour system. One is that it's really helpful to submit photos into the system, ideally comparison photos, because when I look at a picture, I may not know an area very well. So if I can see what it looks like during a really dry year versus a more normal year, that's really helpful to myself and others. These photos and the reports are available to the public. And so I just like to make that note as you're uploading information that anybody in the public can access these photos and the reports themselves. Next slide, please. So with that, I want to thank all of the presenters today. You can see their names as well as their affiliation and email addresses on the screen. And on the right side, I do want to remind everybody of the Wyoming Drought Information and Resources website. where we do have a lot of different information and resources out there, including assistance programs. And we are looking for any feedback or input you have on the website, including information that is on there, as well as the ease of navigating the website and how we can improve it as we move into the winter, and hopefully are able to spend some more time on the website. Also, these webinars are posted there. If you ever miss a webinar, you can access them on the Wyoming Drought Information and Resources website. And the CoCoRaHS as well as the Seymour websites are also listed here. So with that, I also want to thank each of you for attending today, and I will